Good day, I'm junior researcher Adam Southgate, and today's lecture will be a little different. Instead of covering a specific entity, though an entity is discussed, we will be looking over a very well-researched report by Master Hunter Jeffery O'Sullivan. I'd appreciate that all hunters please subscribe as to not miss any future lectures, and also, if you enjoyed the lecture and find it informative, please like the video. I would also be very happy to hear your thoughts, views, and stories of your interactions with the monsters of the spheres in the comment area of this video. The report in question, written by Mr. O'Sullivan, is a fantastic example of the independent research done by some of our more dedicated hunters. I will be reading the report verbatim to spotlight the fine work by Mr. O'Sullivan, while also slipping in my own notes periodically on the events he has discovered. The report is a deep dive into an historical example of, we believe, the Lady of Bones and Roses. The events took place over 100 years ago, but thankfully the personal journal of Captain John Jarvis has survived, becoming the only known surviving record of the incident. Account of Captain John Jarvis of the 3rd Gurkha Rifles Regiment, 14th of September 1904. Upon the conclusion of the Convention of Lhasa, and by extension our successful expedition, it has been a brutally cold passage back to Sikkim. The expedition has been stuck for several days in the Chumblai Valley on account of the landslide blocking our departure via the Natula Pass. While our Gurkhas are used to the cold, many of my British troops have struggled immensely. The snow grows thicker and thicker as I write, my boots stiffen with the creeping ice, even in my tent the creeping bitter menace of the Himalayan ice encroaches upon me. The wind screams, screeches and wails down the harsh valley as though it were the souls of the men we slew at Chumaksenko. It seems to slice at our bones in vengeance for the bloody havoc of the Maxim that we wrought upon them. My batman's fingers have stiffened and blackened with frostbite, and it is all but certain that they shall have to be amputated if the rot is not to spread into the rest of his body. Worryingly, he fears the surgeon's knife more than he fears the creeping death, in spite of all my efforts to convince him. Should he pass, I fear we shall not be able to give him a Christian burial, the rocky soil here being hard to dig during the summer heat, and stronger than polished iron during this deathly cold. Distressingly, in these conditions we would have to leave his body to freeze, the spasms of death preserved in his limbs and anguished face, just as they are in the haggard carcasses of the Tibetan cattle who succumb to disease or famine. Our only salvation from this icy hell so far has been the Buddhist monastery at Dankar. The abbot, not out of generosity, but rather out of fear, has allowed our troops to make some use of the monastery's stores of food and fuel. His tolerance of our stay, low to begin with on account of his opinion of us as barbaric invaders, has been wearing thin each day as we exhaust the meagre supplies that he and his monks' survival depends upon. Indeed, according to Lieutenant Roger Seacliff's reckoning, it is only a week before we and these monks shall succumb to starvation, though I have kept this from many of my men lest they try to make their own passage home. Things being as they are, it came as a great shock to me when the abbot asked that a small part of my men investigate a family of herders who live a dozen miles away from the monastery. He informed me that this family, comprising 5 brothers, had begun following what he perceived as a heretical Bon cult, worshipping a Lamo or goddess that my interpreter translated as the soul of bone and blood. Even with my mind muddled from the aching cold, I was suspicious, suspecting that the monk intended to send us out in penny packets to freeze to death, whittling down our numbers to keep himself safe. As such, I demanded from him a guarantee, in the form of one of his monks, that the mission was not some wild goose chase, insisting this monk accompany us to this family, which, with great reluctance, he consented to. The expedition, comprising myself, my loyal batman, Corporal Jenkins, Lance Nags Rai, and Tamang, shall set out as soon as the weather permits, bringing with us 3 days' rations, and our rifles, as well as the monk from the abbey. I neglected to inform the abbot that I plan to requisition as many supplies as my men can carry from the farm, regardless of who or what lives there. Notes from Master Hunter Jeffery O'Sullivan. For the purposes of clarity, the rank of Naik and Lance Naik were the equivalents within the Indian Army in 1904 and indeed to the present day of Corporal and Lance Corporal. The Soul of Bone and Blood seems to be a Tibetan title, possibly mistranslated, of the Lady of Bones and Roses. Contacts within the Central Tibetan Administration have relayed to us that their equivalent to the order has confirmed that they have no reported incursions from the Lady's subsphere prior to September 1904. Though it should be noted that it is hard to verify this given the destruction of thousands of files and reports by the CCP and their own Bureau of Paranormal Control during the annexation of Tibet and the Cultural Revolution. Should this represent an early manifestation of this entity, I believe the account is crucial to the greater understanding of the process of new entities emerging, potentially helping the Order to recognize and prevent these events in future. Junior researcher Adam Southgate's note. Many such reports of those disconnected from any anti-incursion organization in the past can and has led to discoveries about the spheres. There are untold thousands of such journals, reports, and even legends that those with the knowledge of the spheres can look at and see evidence of the anomalies within. Those like Master Hunter Jeffery O'Sullivan will, while researching for a specific hunt, utilize these old accounts for pieces of information that can prove useful. Mr. O'Sullivan goes further beyond in his research in general, delving deep into historical record to piece together the whole picture. Account of Captain John Jarvis of the 3rd Gurkha Rifle Regiment, 15th of September. We set out, bundled as tightly as possible in the early hours of the morning after the blizzard had eased, though, as we discovered, only for a brief time. We shuffled along through the snow, the monk taking the lead and guiding us towards the brothers' hut. Alas, the break in the snowstorm lasted only for half an hour before the consuming, choking white swallowed us once more. Turning back had become impossible, the drifts and banks burying our footprints seconds after they were made. The monk made a valiant attempt to push forward, guiding us by touch, as all our eyes were sealed against the ice and our necks bent in a vain attempt to conceal us from the bleak and biting cold. Alas, our guide too was confused by the shifting, swirling storm and admitted that there was no way back and that our only hope was that the storm would die down. At this, we all prayed silently to our respective gods, knowing all too well the slow agony that death by hypothermia would bring. Our fingers already felt too numb to even pull a trigger. Then, as our collective despair reached its peak, we heard a song. To me, it was the most haunting melody imaginable. The delicate, tinkling tones of my nursery music box flooded my mind with thoughts of happier times. The warm embrace of my parents and the promise that I could enjoy a similar love and focus should I press on to its source. Jenkins, when I asked him, told me it was the sound of his wife's voice, but singing a melody far more loving, more perfect, and more whole than any of the bawdy songs she performed at the music hall. When I asked him how his wife, who was most assuredly safe and well back in England, could possibly be out here in this frozen hell, he took a faraway look, and though I did not ask, I knew he had already forgotten his wife's name. I could not question our guide, who understood but a few words of English, and Rai and Tamang tried and failed to express what they had heard, but I understood. How could their understanding of English, shaped and formed around orders, drills, and tactics, possibly express the pure and sweet bliss that was that music? They shared with each other what they thought of it in their own tongue, which I too could not comprehend, my understanding of Magyar being as limited as theirs of English when it came to conveying the raw emotion that music conveyed. You may understand, therefore, our collective joy when, as we made our way along the valley, entranced by the beauty of the music, we found it getting louder. 16th of September. The sublime song grew stronger as we made our way toward a precipice. The echoes of the music flowed against us like a deluge, swallowing us in pure love. We crept along a narrow path towards a stone hut, drawn along an invisible thread by the tugging need for unity, a unity of love, a unity of perfection, a unity of an agonized beauty and valiant saviors brought together in a great and beautiful whole. We were stopped then by the sight of a figure curled into a ball of utmost adoration blocking our path, the skin a honeycomb of bone and frozen blood. Suddenly, a cold fury, more bitter than the blizzard, rose within us. This obstacle, this obstruction to our rescue mission was murmuring and muttering in a most vile and heathen blasphemy to our goddess. He turned to us. "Share in our bounty, brother. Be among the many in love to the one." I leveled my Henry, my hand squeezing around the trigger as my jealousy melted the ice that had built up within them, and a shot cracked out across the glacier. The man's body, no more than a shambling husk of frozen blood and brittle bones, rolled down the hillside and into oblivion. The song grew to a crescendo as we reached the summit, a glowing rift in the mass of twisting and twirling snow, calling out to us all, with the monk taking the lead, barreling towards the frozen corpses of the dead man's brothers. He stopped, twisting and writhing in holy rapture, his skin split, layers peeling like a concertina and swelling with blood that froze as soon as it flowed, ice crystals bursting out of the skin. His exposed muscles, meanwhile, calcified into strings and knots of glistening, polished, bleach-white bone. His nails spiraled and whirled, piercing themselves before being connected back by crimson flesh stretched out taut as a drum. Jenkins followed him, stretching out his arms towards the fracture in the world. The sickening, stretching snap of bone thrusting through bone, of the perfection of another world shattering our imperfect copy, stirred me and Tamang like men awakening from the most beautiful dream, mourning the loss of pure perfection. We rushed forward, tackling Jenkins to the ground. He thrashed and flailed against us, clawing and scraping with the strength of a man torn from his lover's grasp. He scratched at us with a ferocity greater than any enemy I have ever found myself fighting against. Had his energies not been split by his scrambling towards the fissure, I must confess that he would most certainly have been able to wound us most badly, having, as he does, a strength and stature honed by many years in the Port Talbot collieries. Alas, while we were distracted, Landsnake Rye managed to make his way past us towards the fissure. Though we did not hear the cracking and stretching at the time, we soon discovered his corpse, mutilated beyond all vestiges of humanity, frozen in ecstasy alongside that of the monk. As Rye died, the fissure seemed to waver and stutter. The song, light and love faded away into the snow, and Jenkins lost all will to resist. Notes by Master Hunter Jeffery O'Sullivan. The collective nature by which Captain Jarvis seems to describe his love for the lady may contradict the standard emotional response to the lady's influence, which I believe can either be attributed to his fraternal bond with his men as a military man, which is not present in the influenced civilians we tend to deal with in the Order, or the influence itself being of a fundamentally different nature, which I believe may be deduced via analysis of reports of the lady's influence affecting other military personnel in the present day, ideally among units noted for their cohesion and camaraderie. The latter option implies that the lady's influence is either intentionally or not adapted or influenced by the culture of the area in which the breach occurs, being a clear mirror to Tibetan fraternal polyandry. Whether or not this malleability is due to the relative metaphorical distance between the lady's subsphere and our own at the time this report was written, or is inherent to the lady, is unknown, and thus, I recommend the Order examines modern reports of the lady's influence among other non-monogamous groups, such as the Church of the Latter-day Saints. Junior researcher Adam Southgate, note: while I currently do not have access to other military encounters with the lady, I do know of a polygamous cult within the US that did fall under the lady's influence. The cult, originally your typical doomsday types with a particular focus on free love, originally worshipped their leader, who claimed to be the reincarnation of Christ. After an unknown member of the cult discovered a rift created by the lady, the larger group gathered to witness. The cult's leader attempted to command his followers to stay away, claiming the lady as his personal bride. This did not go well, with the larger cult turning on their once leader, leaving him very much dead. For 5 years, this cult collectively began worshipping the lady as the All Bride, until they were eventually wiped out by the American RRR. Account of Captain John Jarvis of the 3rd Gurkha Rifles Regiment, 17th of September. Dear Jenkins is among the angels. He spent all of the time after the fading of the rift weeping uncontrollably. It saddens me to no end to see a man who I'd spent years fighting alongside in such a state, protesting the horrors of how his one true love had been denied to him forever. Though me and Tamang had not gotten as close to the rift as Jenkins had, we also understood the loss and grief he was exclaiming, as that too burned within our hearts, though to a lesser extent. Indeed, I worry how I can ever look my dear Evangeline in the same way again, understanding that our love is a shadow on the wall of Plato's cave. As the rift closed, the blizzard slowly ebbed away, though still aching in the cold and howling wind, we could at least see the monastery to trudge back to. The hut revealed nothing edible, the strips of yak meat the herders hung up to dry having ossified into lumps as hard as the rocks outside, whilst the pail of milk, though it had not rotted, was coated in a film of bloodied tissue. Some fuel was found, however, in the form of the brothers' bedding, strips of which we tore off to give us pieces of cotton, some of which we crammed into our haversacks, and some of which Tamang set alight to allow us to regain the feeling within our frozen limbs. As we sat around the fire, we turned our attention towards Jenkins' well-being. His fingers, blackened by frostbite, were run through with streaks of bone. His thumb, meanwhile, was stripped to the bone, with bloodied and twisted tissue wrapping around in a spiral about this bone. I instructed him to roll up his sleeves, which he duly did. The skin of his arms was turning into flakes of bone, and as his tunic moved upwards, Jenkins let out the most pitiable of whimpers as these flakes peeled and chafed off his skin. He pleaded with us for death, and as the infection grew, I felt I had no choice. I asked for his Henry, mine having been emptied already, and my fingers too numb to reload. As I levelled it against his forehead, I closed my eyes in silent prayer, though I could not tell you to which deity, and squeezed the trigger. Poor Jenkins shall stay, frozen and decaying in that hut, till the end of time. Notes by Master Hunter Jeffery O'Sullivan. The fact that both Captain Jarvis and Lance Snake Tamang were both able to escape the lady's influence and, to my knowledge, leave relatively normal lives, although Jarvis would divorce his wife and leave the Anglican Church upon his return to England, and Tamang would develop an opium addiction, being discharged from the Indian Army in 1908 and dying in 1911, is something that indicates to me that the encounter occurred at a relatively early stage of the lady's subsphere, either approaching our own or emerging. This, given the fact that her influence has strengthened considerably, shows that her subsphere has grown immensely in power over the past century, posing a concerning scenario of a complete merge in the future, though I cannot predict when such an event would occur, only that the actions of her cultists seem very much orientated around its acceleration, although it may settle into a state of equilibrium with our own, much as the aberration sphere has over the past decade. Junior researcher Adam Southgate's note. While Mr. O'Sullivan's speculation on the progress of the lady's subsphere is concerning, it must be mentioned that the spheres do appear to almost ebb and flow, decreasing and increasing in frequency of incursions and strength of incursions. I have put forth a request to the larger order to conduct a specific study into the frequency of the lady's incursions, as I am aware I may be attempting to quiet my own concerns. But to the larger point of this video, this is a fantastic example of a research report by a hunter. It shows historical precedent along with theorizing sociological reasons for certain inconsistencies. It truly is outstanding work. In the future, I will place such reports in the post section of the Order of Merlin's channel for all to read. However, this one has been highlighted as the gold standard for such work. I'd like to thank Jeffery O'Sullivan for his contribution, and all of you for watching. So, with Arthur's might and Merlin's wisdom, thank you.